Welcome to this week's video on My Hero Academia. This week I'm reviewing episode 1 of volume 4 of Vigilantes, an episode called Family, because My Hero Academia is all about family. Anyway, you know how this works. Leave a comment down below, let me know what you thought about this particular episode. Whilst you there, be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell and do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Support your local small content creator today, it will do them a power of good. If you hear any weird banging and clattering in the background, it's because we're in the middle of a storm, so now you know. With all that said and done, let us get into the positives and start off as we do, oftentimes with the positives, with the headline positives for this review. And I have to say that this was a very odd little episode, and, you know, to be quite frank, it's a little bit too early into the video to say the exact words that I'd use to describe it, because you know what YouTube's like, but it was pretty creepy and unsettling at times, it has to be said, yet at the same time it does give us some key insights into a core character who, let's be honest, has been quite quiet as of late. You know, we get a real good insight into them, which I'll discuss about in more detail shortly. Now, anyone who has read this episode will know that, well, there's certain things that they really want me to talk about. They want me to talk about the thing, and the other thing. But for now, let's talk about other things. I'm sorry about being cagey about all this, dear listener, but you know what YouTube's like, and quite frankly, I think I still need a little bit more time to just get used to what I've seen, even though it's been a good week since I read this one. So, with that in mind, let us talk about Soga, and I do apologise for the immediate term. We're going to be discussing this in a little bit more linear detail, which is something I don't really like when it comes to reviews, but hey-ho, we should continue on. This episode sees the return of Soga, a character that has been, quite honestly, rather conspicuous by his absence thus far in the series. When he was first introduced, I genuinely thought that he was being set up to become some kind of rival for Crawler. He would somehow, as time would go by, become more and more of a villain before he ends up becoming the big bad or a henchman to the big bad when that eventually comes along in another 50 or so volumes or episode time. Or maybe he would become a pro-hero, more of a hero than Crawler could ever be, but he just vanished almost as soon as he appeared. We had the episode with the toy collector and that was just about it. He disappeared for the longest time. He did make a comeback in the volume before last, which was a great little run. It was a brilliant little insight into his backstory, that whole sequence where we get to learn why he is the way that he is, I think was fantastic. The artwork was great, it was brilliantly written, could have been a little bit more grotesque for my liking, but still, I really did enjoy that. I was looking forward to seeing what they would end up doing with him in the previous volume, and then nothing happened. I don't even think he was so much as a background character for most of it, which, you know, is kind of disappointing, but hey-ho, he's back, and I will admit that seeing him here and now in the way that he's presented, he really does almost feel like a character from another show. You know, given how rarely he is in this whole series in general, it feels like he's just having some kind of cameo appearance, like he's from a different series entirely, like he's from the main series, or he's from a different spin-off series, and this is just his almost court-appointed cameo episode, but that really isn't the case, but it does kind of feel like that given what very little we end up seeing of him. But with that said, he does get that big reveal later on in the episode, but we'll discuss that shortly. Though it does feel as though with his presence here that they are setting up to do more with him over the course of this volume. He cut such a solemn and tragic figure that to not do anything else with him from this point out would feel rather odd. We've had the setup getting to an understanding of his backstory, so not to do anything more with him, to delve deeper into that or to explore his personality, would be a tragic waste of time, though of course we'll soon see about that. I think that they're an interesting character. I think that the contrast between him and the personalities of his friends, who, despite everything, seem rather sparky and have a bit of personality, despite the fact that, you know, given everything that's happened to them, he's an interesting one, and I hope that we get to see a little bit more about all three of them as time goes by. They're a good little trio, and I think that Soga as a character is one that has a lot of room to grow and develop and to become a kind of memorable character within this series, but we'll see how that goes. I think it's fair to say that the main heart of this episode was learning more about Knuckleduster, or at least as much as we can do given the sheer number of code names and pseudonyms that were being used in this episode. In this episode, we see him in a far more normal form. We've seen him in this kind of guise before when he was trying to look presentable and not like a nutcase in front of Crawler's mother a few episodes ago. but now we see him well and truly in normal mode. No costume, no running around, no punching people to just try and save the day. He's just normal man, normal family man. We see the human side of him, which has just not been seen at all thus far. To be quite blunt, for the most part, Knuckleduster's time in this series has been mostly as a gag. As I've mentioned before, he's like Batman without the subtlety. His straight solution to every single problem is to punch it really hard in the face. And if that does not solve the solution, then he will just keep punching it until somehow that solves the problem. In this, we don't get that. This is a very much more personal look into him as a character, and an insight as to why he is the way that he is, though, of course, this feels like it's going to be the thrust of the entire volume thus far. He and B are the cover figures for this particular volume, so it's very much focused that this is going to be about those two in particular, and we're going to get greater insights into both of them as this volume goes along. In this episode, we learn his wife has either some form of terminal illness, or is just very ill. It feels rather NDMI for my liking. Nondescript movie illness, which is of course a very deep cut for long-term followers of this channel. I'm really curious as to whether or not B actually did something to his wife. They seem to have a patch over their same eye as B does, or at least that part of their face is obscured. They are drawn in such a gaunt way that they kind of resemble their family that we see later on, but we'll discuss that later on. And looking at my notes, we're going to discuss something that's... oh god, look, as I mentioned in the preamble to this, in the headlines, this is a creepy episode, but creepy in a good way, not like the novelty villains that we had a few weeks ago. Like, this is leaning more into horror stuff, which I'm kind of okay with that making me feel uncomfortable. You know, it's supposed to be unsettling, and boy, boy oh boy, does this episode get that right. Mostly, I suppose, due to how disarming it all is, because thus far, this series hasn't really gone into anything quite this dark. I suppose you could argue this stuff with Stendhal/Stain was a dipping its toe into dark areas, but that kind of horror was more psychological, and with the biases that you may or may not have towards that character. Whether or not you find it horrific is down to your own personal tastes. Though I will admit there's other things in this series that I find equally scary, but we might discuss them in a few moments shortly. With all that said, I think it's time for us to talk about the thing. The stuff with the bees. The bees, they... oh god, oh Jesus, oh lord. The bee, right, seems to have bees that live in her eye. She has like a beehive in her eyes. She has the eye patch over her eye to hide that fact, and... the classmate that Soga meets has bees in... she has bees in her... oh no. Oh lord, no. Oh god, no. Oh Jesus. We really are leaning into body horror stuff in this series, aren't we? Like, kind of like we did in the episode that first introduced B, where we had all those innocent people who got jabbed with trigger and their bodies started to mutate out of control and they started to attack people and the hero started beating them up. That kind of stuff was really creepy, and now it gets into a whole other area that's just as fucking weird. Like, did B do this to her, or does she have some kind of control over it? Is this just another person who has a similar quirk? Because it has been established that people can have identical or similar quirks in this series and the main series. So is it just like a kindred spirit thing? Say both have bees, one has bees in her eye and the other one has bees in her... yeah, and so they think, oh, we're going to team up and get up to bad time stuff? Or is she part of the same villain stuff that B is just up to generally? You know, maybe she is just controlled by the same force that maybe B is controlled for. Or maybe B is controlling her in some form. Maybe they both work under the same villain. I really don't know, because thus far we haven't really gone that far into it. I don't know if I want to see more of it. Like, this is getting into some really creepy body horror stuff, but to be fair, it's not getting it into a way which feels gratuitous. Like, it's a sudden spike of terror. You see it, you double check it to make sure your eyes aren't tricking you, then you see it, and then nope. Just no. As I mentioned, I think the big thing that really makes it as effective as it is just how disarming it is. This series, whether it be this Vigilantes thing, or the main series itself has never really gone down this path. Yes, in the main series there have been some horrific moments, but they are far, far more psychological in nature. It's far more existential in nature. It's about the nightmarish situation that it is to live in that particular world, and just how cruel and unforgiving it can be of people that really don't deserve it. But to get into something that is more explicitly horror like this, we don't really get. Yes, we do get it with Stain, but Stain, for the most part, is kind of presented as being more of just a supervillain more than anything else. More so than this weird psychopathic serial killer slasher villain thing that really he should be more presented as. But here it's something that is just pure, just unadulterated. Oh god, that's horrible. And, you know, I will admit that there was a part of me that did genuinely think that they were going to set up for some kind of rather unfortunate joke. Oh, you want to know about the locals, do you? Well, what about this? Because you do have the line that from Soga who says, oh, no, I'm not into that kind of stuff. So it kind of feels like it's setting up for a joke, and then it happens. And if this was the only unnerving thing in this episode, it would have been fine. But it isn't, because then we get to learn about Bea and her new family. Oh god! There is a split second again where you think that it really is her family, or a surrogate family, like a cover, like the villains that she's working with, have put some other villains to work with to make it look like they're a normal, everyday Japanese family. But that's not the case. Her family's just dead bodies. It's just dead bodies that have been posed in such a way to make them look like a loving family. She really is a rather twisted little so-and-so, isn't Bea? Isn't she, Bea? Oh, good lord. I suppose in a wider sort of way, and I should be thankful of this, is that as horrifying as all of this is, it does lend credence to my palette cleanser arc theory. You know, the previous arc was full of wacky, silly, fun times with our heroes. Getting up to silly shenanigans and getting up to fun, and there wasn't really anything major. The stakes were never really all that high, and when they were, the stakes themselves were dealt with almost as soon as they came along. It was just fun, knockabout superhero time. This week, we get into something that's probably one of the darker episodes in the whole Vigilantes series, and one of the darkest in the whole series full stop. And whilst I do appreciate that, good lord, was I not expecting it. I really wasn't. So with all that said and done, let us get into some negatives. And this is one that I've just had spring into mind, so forgive me if it's not well scripted, but I think that the emotional snap, the juxtaposition between this and the last previous episode and the last previous volume is a bit sharp for me. Like, I love what we see in this episode. It is creepy, it is freaky, it is unnerving, it is everything that it needs to be, but I think it's a bit too soon to suddenly snap into that. Though with that said, given how soon that we do snap into that, is what makes it quite as effective as it is, so whether or not I can truly consider it as a negative, I really don't know. To actually go back into stuff that actually I feel does constitute actual written negatives, first of all, I think that the episode in and of itself was fine, but I think that the stuff with Soga and his mental state and him coming to terms with everything that's happened to him over the past few weeks, and the stuff with Knuckleduster and his family, it feels a little bit overshadowed by the horror-inflicted stuff. There's this part of me in the back of my head that's just imagining if this series gets an anime, what are people going to run with as far as their captions and thumbnails for this particular review of this particular episode in the anime going to be? Is it going to be about the tragedy of these two characters? Or is it going to be about, whoa, bees coming out of the what? Or is it going to be about, oh, creepy dead bodies? No, it's going to be about those things. It's going to be about the horror-inflicted stuff, not the interpersonal drama stuff, which makes me worry that that kind of stuff is going to be overlooked and overridden. And there's a part of me that's going to make me worry that certain idiots are going to see that as being filler over the creepy, nasty stuff. Beyond this, I feel that, and this is something that's exclusive to this volume, this presentation to it, it's not with the episode itself, I just have to underline that. But the behind-the-scenes bit at the end of this episode in the volume gives away a major spoiler. Now, to be fair, it's a spoiler that you could have guessed, or, well, I think, how do I put this? On the one hand, it's a spoiler that I saw coming, but at the same time, it was a spoiler that was spoilt for me ahead of time. I was looking up reference images to help me draw the thumbnails, and right there on the page, it just said, this thing! And it really pissed me off, because thus far I'd managed to avoid spoilers for this series. The only two spoilers I've had for this series are the fact that this, and the fact that Stain was going to be in it. Aside from that, you know, everything else has gone under the radar for me. And with that said, I do hope that anyone in the comment section don't spoil it for me or for anyone else, please, for the love of Christ. Like, I've had so much first spoiled for me for the remainder of the main series, for goodness sake. I could pretty much just write out what I think is going to happen, and it probably would be right. But, you know, even with that said, I really don't like the fact that, predictable or not, it was just given away in the volume notes itself, because, yeah, seriously, this volume has another 6 or 7 parts in it, and we've already just been told this is the thing. And I really don't like that. Save this kind of spoiler-heavy stuff for right at the end. Because right at the end of the volumes, the behind-the-scenes stuff is usually the weakest. It's just, oh, hey, we wanted to design a character that looked like this. So we did. Okay. This would have been a great time to learn about that thing you spoilt several pages ago, but hey-ho, diddly-do, you do you, boo. Googly grief. But anyway, with all that said and done, let us get into the overview, and I have to say that this was a great episode. It was creepy and very well put together. I do admit that I feel that the stuff with Knuckleduster does, and regretfully will, get a little bit lost amongst all the horror. But this isn't going to be the last we see of him in this arc. I mean, he's on the cover of the friggin' volume, for Christ's sake. We're going to see him from beginning to end. This is probably very much going to be his arc, so there we have it. We're going to see more of him. Well, that said and done, let us get into Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner, and once again we kick off with Big X1, who says, it was a fun volume, but I'm looking forward to things getting more serious from here on. Thank you for your comment, and, you know, certainly by the looks of things, your wish has been granted. It's probably going to be a fairly serious volume from here on out. It will be interesting to see if the volume after this then gets into lighter, brighter territory again like the previous one did. But we'll soon see about that. I'm curious to see how they actually stick the landing with all of this. Because as I've just mentioned, yes, I do know where this is going because of spoilers. I'm just interested to see if they can stick the landing with all of that. Next up, it's Taken Name, who says, waiting for your reviews has made me reread all 15 volumes. 1/5 of the way there. Good luck. Thank you for your comment, and, you know, it's great to hear that you're rereading the manga again because of this. If anyone else has been listening to these videos and have gone back to reread this stuff, let me know in the comment section. It will be interesting to see how many people have. I think Big X1 in a previous episode said that they've started reading it because of my reviews, so, you know, just let me know. Or are you just happening to happen upon this because YouTube recommended it? Would be nice to see where some of this traffic's coming from, rather than trying to make heads or tails of the analytics stuff, because sometimes that can be not a whole lot useful. With all that said and done, thank you for your comments, and if you would like to leave a comment, you can do so by just going in the comment section down below. Let me know what you thought about this particular video. With all that said and done, thank you all for listening, and see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!